it only is 4% or only is 6%.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Well, I'm glad you don't have to say it now.
I am blessed to be here with Andrew Roach. I am Ross Bridges. We are here helping you find your way home. This is part 3 of our Investors series. Hope you've enjoyed part 1 and 2. We will do a bit of a recap before we jump into it. And we've got some exciting news, for part 3 in terms of some more information that we want to present to you as our clients, our audience, and our friends.
Absolutely. If you did or you haven't, caught the episode 1 and 2 there of the investor series, episode 1, we kind of talked about, types of investment properties. There's a lot of times people are coming to us saying, hey, I'd like to buy an investment property, but what does that look like? Right. There's all kinds, anywhere from student rentals to multifamily to single family homes, condos, fixer uppers, flips, all that kind of stuff. Right. Like, the investment world is huge. Then we moved on to part 2, where we talked about, locations, what drives the real estate market, if you will, and making a good investment, making maybe an investment a good investment, or a good investment a great investment. Ultimately, you want to demand in the area so that real estate prices will increase in value. And what does that look like? What drives those? So part 3 here, we're going to end up talking about, diving into properties, right? How do you assess a property? How do you find a property? Talking about, screening tenants, property management companies, getting into the actual property itself. Once you know what you want to buy and where you want to buy it, or what type of investment you want to buy and where you want to buy it. Sorry, now you're going to find the one that you want to buy, right? So
let's keep it real. We're going to talk a lot about, in part episode 3 here, we're probably going to go off on a couple different rails. We're probably going to make sure that you guys are excited, confused, and that's kind of where we want you, because that's kind of where we are a lot of our time in our career is, you want to make sure that you know what you want, but it can be very stressful. It's a process in terms of finding what you want. One of the things that I definitely want to talk a lot about today, and we've captured on it in the first couple, is time, and then the return on your time investment, your energy, and then leveraging money, right? So there are many different ways that you can purchase a property. One of the things that Andrew and I are going to be doing in the months and years ahead, there's going to be joint venture opportunities for a lot of you out there. So if you're interested in buying multiplexes, converting a single dwelling into a duplex, a triplex, learning the ins and outs of the arts of financing with, what qualifies up to 5 units or 8 units, or, understanding the zoning, the classification, the planning, the importance of having a good home inspector, connecting with your lawyer before you even get started so that you have an understanding. It's an education. We've been blessed, both of us now in real estate for over a decade, to get a tremendous wealth of education in terms of all the ins and outs. I think of some of the leaders out there, like in terms of coaches for real estate investments, Robert Kawasaki, Scott McGilvery. I know that Andrew, you talk a lot about like the flip to yourself, the BRRR program. I don't know if I said enough R's, but there's many different ways in which to do this. And a big goal for you guys is to dream, allow yourself to kind of think outside the box, and we're planning for a future to get the heck out of this rat race.
Yeah. You brought up some good points there. Some good topics, and, we talk about getting into joint ventures and all that kind of stuff. If you're not familiar with what a joint venture is, basically once you kind of gain enough experience, or heck, maybe you can find somebody within the family or a good friend or something like that, that doesn't have time. But ultimately, once you get yourself enough experience, you've done purchased a few investment properties already, you got some experience under the belt, you got some properties under your belt, you got some returns that you can show, right? Showing what, return on investment would be. You can then go out to a money partner, right? A joint venture with somebody and say, okay, listen, I've got all the contacts, I've got the type of home, I've got the system in place, but I've just run out of capital. who would like to split this with me? And when I look back at my investment properties, when I kind of do an analysis of how well they've done, oftentimes they'll range, between like 40 to 60% annualized return on investment, right? That'll change year to year. And sometimes, unless you time the market properly, which never try to time the market, but I mean, it just the way that things go, sometimes, the first couple of years might be a little bit slow and it doesn't look like you made the right decision. But if you get lucky, maybe you buy a property and within a month it's already gone up, 50,000, or something like that. But ultimately, if you just kind of do a very conservative analysis to make sure that you're not, saying, well, hey, the real estate market went up 30% this year, so I'm going to bank on the real estate market going up 30% every year. Well, that would just be foolish naturally, right? So look at like historic averages, and say, okay, well, if I think, if I could say that I believe the real estate market will continue to go up, 4%, 5%, right? That would be conservative. And then ultimately you're going to be doing your assessment of location to pick, okay, which areas are going to outperform the provincial average. Then you can maybe, if you bank on 4, but you get 6, 7, or 8, well, that's just bonus. But you don't want to, hope for 6, 7, or 8, and then you only end up getting 4 or something like that. But anyways, I digress. As far as a joint venture partner goes, you're going in on a partnership. One person's bringing the money and the other person's doing all the work, and then you split the profits, right?
And I mean, we can educate you in terms of what that looks like, right? If you're getting a group, starting a corporation, if you want to say you've got a building location where you're like, oh, this is a good 3,000 square foot box, and I want to convert this into 3 dwellings, right? And to ensure that it falls under the zoning, those classifications, and that's where, going to the city and having those relationships, that's something that we've done throughout our careers to ensure that we're getting the information needed before you purchase something and realize you don't do it. Parking is critical as well too. So joint ventures are a great way. Say you're pretty young right now and you're like, I hate it when I hear people are like, or we say like the older generations, it's going to be so hard for, the younger generation to buy homes. Well, a great way to get into it is to do it with a friend, a family member, like Andrew mentioned there, where you can put it together, and maybe it's something you start renting, you still live at home, which I think is an amazing idea if you're younger, and then you could move into it, so on and so forth, right? So there's different options in terms of entering into the real estate market, right? Robert Kawasaki, I studied him many years ago, and I think as you get older, you think about, he talks a lot about buying units. So like multiplexes, maybe you're looking out to further markets where places where there's colleges or universities. St. Catharines comes to mind. Brock University would be a great place to put one. I'm looking at where it's still a lower evaluation, where you can still get in, like what's in our immediate market. Like, I'm not talking Barrie or Kingston, like London would be close to us. Your market's just gone through a tremendous boom, right? You look at like Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Milton, like a lot of the prices there, like it's hard to find something comfortably for under 500,000-600,000, right?
Yeah.
So just know, right? So Niagara Falls is good options right now. Hamilton, if you're looking at multi-dwellings, then, and you can go a little bit higher in your price point, if you get into that $700,000-800,000 bracket, that is doable. Definitely under $1 million. It's finding, and we talk a lot about like location, right? It comes down to, new builds are always a good option, because then it's more controlled money going out, and you have a time to put that money aside for what your down payment is going to be.
Now, and I'm gonna comment on, the new builds are always a great option. They're their own animal, right? So
yeah.
It's not a catch-all like, okay, well, buying resale is risky, but it's 100% safe buying a new build. I don't think that you meant it's, that it's always a good option. Hey, go and do this. It's just that it's an option on the table.
Another option.
Yeah, it's another option on the table, right? Because I mean, yeah, new builds are, like I said, you got to get into the reputation of the builder. How well are they on their time frames? Are they? I mean, the number of times, like, it happens in Toronto a lot because it's such a big city and you have so many of them. But we just had one of these large, condo developers come in, plan this big condo development, and then they went under, or I don't know if they went under, what the deal was, but they ended up selling the project to somebody else. Right. And then that adds a level of complexity. Things get delayed. You hear of like projects taking 5, 6, 7, 8 years to finish when you're buying the property and they say, that you're going to be closing in 2 years or 3 years or something like that. Right. And it's more than twice the length of time. Right. So
I'm really glad you said that, because I mean, there's no guarantee with new builds, right? There's a lot of times where we have seen default issues. Within the first 2 years of new builds, that's where they have the most issues. Mechanical systems, you could have a lot of problems. So if you're planning to rent it out, you could be looking at vacancy issues right from the beginning. You could be looking at special provisions. Just to educate you guys on what a special provision is. Some of you might have heard of it, and a status certificate. But a special provision is when there's an additional cost on top of what you would need to pay for. So say something went wrong with the mechanical system and it was $2 million for the condo to fix this, or maybe that's a too large an amount, but it was an excessive amount, then it would be divided between each unit to have to settle that amount, right? So it can be stressful if you move into a brand new place, and then on top of that, you're having these additional bills of what could be, a few $1,000s.
Yeah, for sure. And though, I mean, I would say that like that stuff oftentimes happens, later on, because everything is new and some stuff would be under warranty and all that kind of stuff. But it happens. I mean, we have a condo in Milton here that was maybe, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years old. I can't remember exactly, but long story short, the underground parking, the concrete, I guess, didn't cure properly or whatever. And the underground parking kept flooding, and they didn't have enough time to build up the reserve fund because the condo was still too new. And blow my mind, for some reason, Tarion wouldn't cover it. I'm like, that sounds like a perfect Tarion claim, right? The building, the foundation, the structure of the building was not sound, but Tarion wouldn't cover it for some reason. So they had to go and do, you call it special provisions. I've always called it special assessment, but the point's the same. You're going back and saying, hey, we don't have enough money in the reserve fund. Everybody cough up, right? And it was, I think it was $10,000 per unit to chip in to fix that underground, the concrete and the underground parking to stop it from flooding the underground parking area, right? So anyways, we're going to go down this rabbit hole. We're going to go off. It's just going to be a long tangent again. I'm going to pull us back here to assessing properties. So, one of the things that you want to do, of course, when you found a property that you're interested in, is you want to work the numbers, right? And that's always the biggest question. I remember when I got started, the biggest question I always had was, well, I don't know what the rents are going to be. I don't know what it'll rent for. Like, it's not rented yet. How do I know what the rents are going to be? And again, you don't want to be like, well, I think I'll rent it out for $2,000, but realistically, market rents are $1,500. Well, you just set yourself up for a $500 a month shortfall, right? So, how do you find out what rents are? Depending on the market that you're looking to buy in, you either will go to a realtor and you'll ask them what would market rents be, because, in our market, most rentals go through realtors. But if you go out to like KWC or you go into Hamilton or something like that, they're all done. I shouldn't say they're all done, but a lot of them are done, Kijiji, Craigslist, through property managers, et cetera, not a system that you can go and look it up. Right. So in those cases, you gotta get your, gotta do your own footwork, right? Go on to rental classified ads, right? And say, okay, well, what's market rent seem to be? And if you see this one outlier, don't be like, oh, well, they're asking that, so obviously that's the right price. You go and you say, okay, what's the common price for a two bedroom condo, or the basement apartment of a house, right? Something like that. Because if you're going to say, okay, I'm going to duplex this bungalow, well, maybe, you might be able to say, well, what does a bungalow rent for? Let's just say a bungalow rents for $2,000 a month. You can't realistically expect someone on the upper floor to have somebody living in their basement still pay $2,000 a month. So you have to give some of that back, right? You might say, okay, well, if I have someone in the basement, I'll rent upstairs for, $1,700-$1,800 a month, right? Or something like that. But then I'll make that difference up in the basement by renting out the basement for, again, $800-$900 a month, maybe $1,000 a month, depending on, again, what your market is, right? Those numbers are going to change dramatically, but you got to do your homework to find out, okay, what will rents be? What will realistic rents be when you're purchasing a property, right? So that you can find out, will it cash flow or not?
And then obviously you got to be prepared for vacancy loss. Roll in your property taxes, ensure that your tenants are prepared to pay for all or most of the utilities. Mentally preparing yourself for there's going to be some maintenance needed on the dwelling. The parking situation is kind of critical. So like I've said earlier, when you're going through the zoning classification, you got to make sure that it falls in suit. I mean, most people in this day and age are going to want a parking spot, depending on where they are. I mean, if you're close to college or university, then you can go without that. But that is critically important. But yeah, you got to run the numbers and be ahead of where you think it's going to be. But right now the demand for rentals is extremely high. So it is a very, very good time to be entering the market as an investor. We've seen a slight lull in the market now. We're right towards the end of April. And it's a good opportunity to at least explore your options before I believe there will be a second wave. There's also going to be a lot of inventory. I'm confident that you're going to see a lot of homes coming on the market in the weeks and months ahead. So if you're looking for options, variety as to what you're going to be able to see, I would argue for the first time in a long time, we're going to be seeing some good inventory, some good different dwellings for you guys to go out and have a look at.
Yeah, actually, I was going to try to quickly pull up an email that I just received from our brokerage, which broke down quarterly numbers from 2020 to 2021. Now, obviously, I've been following the averages, average sale price pretty closely. And that's where we saw like 33% in January, 29% in February. I think March was 22%, if I remember correctly, right? Like a year over year average increase or even median increase. We're very, very, very close. But we'll actually
on that a little bit more, Andrew, just for everyone listening, kind of give them a heads up on obviously how it's going up each year.
Yeah, well, so I mean that's what I was talking about earlier, as far as looking at what is your anticipated annual increase, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're saying like if the average annual increase over the last say 25 years was 10%, 6% or 5% or something like that, and here we are having a 25% or a 30% annual increase. You certainly don't want to be banking on being like, okay, well, it's going to be 30%. And I heard you just, as I said, 5 or 6%, I heard you say 10%. And, so I also wouldn't say, okay, well, the average is 6, but we saw 30 this year, so I'll bump that 6 up to 10. Right. Because that might just be setting yourself up for just a little bit, maybe too aggressive of an expectation. And if your numbers, if whatever you're doing and however you justify you're going to be going into this, and you set your expectations to be like, okay, well, the average is 6. We saw 30 last year, so I'm going to bump that 6 up to 10. And then, something happens to the real estate market, and you know, we are at these like euphoric highs where everyone's like, "Oh, I'll keep going forever. It's never going to stop, man. It's amazing." Right. And then something happens. I mean, heck, let's just remember for a half a moment here that we're in a global pandemic, right?
Mhm.
And I think we forget about that because it at times anyways, naturally we're reminded every, you know, couple of months when we have to go and do a lockdown again. But the real estate market is just bananas right now. And while you can look at indicators as to why the real estate market has gone up so fast, at the same time, generally speaking, like it doesn't make sense. Like if you look at any analyst or anything, anybody like, you look at CMHC forecasted the market to go down last year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it went up substantially. And you know, they forecasted a modest increase this year, and we're up like it's just bananas, right? Like so,
Faster.
it doesn't make sense the levels that we're at right now, right?
No, and in terms of, so I'm just gonna kind of take her back 1 second here. I would say traditionally you're looking a little bit higher than 6%, 8 to 10%. And if we're looking at it like,
Yeah, so I wasn't trying to give actual real numbers because because I don't know where these people are going to be buying, right? I don't know where, if someone's looking at downtown Toronto or they're looking at, you know, I don't know, Bancroft or looking at London, like, you know. So again, I'm just throwing out numbers there. I wasn't saying that it's not 10% or it only is 4% or only is 6%.
That's exactly what I was about to say. In terms
I'm glad you don't have to say it now.
You're looking at the segments within your market, right? And that's why you want to contact your local realtor, micro versus macro. So if we're talking this overall huge picture, you want to know what's going on in your local market. And we see certain communities that have gone on massive runs. Andrew talked about it earlier. Like you see places like London that have gone through crazy booms. Chatham, Kent is ridiculously hot. Windsor's been on fire. You know, I look back to, okay, so what's going to change the markets, right? Typically, so we saw a government correction. Okay, that was April 21st of 2017. That kind of slowed things down for a little bit. We had a recession back in, you know, that was the fall of 2008. And I look at more conservative cities like where I work, like Oakville, Burlington, and there was a slight corrections. Prices didn't really go down, but they sure as heck didn't go up. And that was the better part of a year. And then it was a slow rebound where you saw a little bit more traditional things were going slower. But I mean, what I've anticipated, and Andrew and I have talked about this, is now it's going to be wag the dog. It's going to be the media getting in talks with the banks and the conversations to slow things down, to scare the everyday consumer into thinking that, oh, prices are going to go down. Prices are going to go down. Well, traditionally, we have not seen that happen. So why the heck is it going to start happening now when there is, if we look at it from a basic 101 economics, supply and demand, there's been very low supply and high demand. Now we're going to start to see a little bit higher supply.
And so if we see higher supply, then is demand increasing as well?
Well, I think the demand, like what we've talked about in other episodes with 10,000 millennials entering the market, so many people new to our country, a population of only 38,000, immigration, they're not slowing that down. So we're seeing the floodgates opening where they're still allowing way too many people coming in. And right now, I'm sorry, here's my complaint for this episode is stop the planes coming into the country. Let's just shut her down. We say it's a lockdown. Lockdown should mean nobody is coming into our country. That should be a lockdown.
I am in agreement with that. Now I know that there are more factors at play. I can appreciate that, and certainly someone that needs to, I don't know, fly around to be like, hey, you're locked down, you can't fly anymore. They're going to be up in arms, right? So I get that. I have to say that when we're looking at these variants coming in from England or India, this new one from South Africa and another third one from India, how are they getting here?
How are they? 27 planes coming in from India, I think I heard in the last week. Come on, man. You gotta stop that.
Right. But I mean, at the same time, so I think I generally lean towards that. Listen, if we're gonna control this thing, then let's control it, rather than if we're gonna let's control it. I put quotation marks in the air. Yet let's just make sure that all of big business gets to keep doing their thing, right? So, but at the same time, you have like airlines. I guess what you would just say, you can do just regional flights only, or domestic flights only, I suppose, right? I don't know.
So I think that we just need to keep it within Canada. At least it's more controlled. I think we talk about micro and macro. Like let's keep it real right now. We gotta close the borders. We close our borders provincially, but then we're allowing people from other parts of the world, and that just makes no sense.
Yeah, that is a little bit ridiculous. I was, and I wonder if people think like it's like our measures, our more extreme measures aren't working. Last night, just for fun, I was chatting with a relative, and he was talking about the snowbirds and what's going on in Florida and all that kind of stuff. And his perception was that, Florida isn't locked down, is basically, open masks or can do whatever they want. Right. And his perception was that it's not exploding down there. And I looked up on a per million basis. They have, 101,000 cases per million in Florida, per million population. And then he was comparing it to California, and California had 94,000 cases per million. And so I said, well, because he thought that, Florida's an older population, so they're going to be more conservative and they're going to be more conscious of their health risks, et cetera. But whereas California is a younger population and they don't really care, et cetera. And I'm like, well, that blew that thought out of the water, because Florida is actually higher than California. And so again, his perception was that they're doing better than we are. So I looked up our cases per million as Canada as a whole. And we're 30,000 cases per million. So, we're significantly better off, but I think we could still be doing more. And again, I think the country's torn right now. I don't want this to turn into a COVID show, but I think the country's
but there's other variables too, like in terms of how many tests are being done, right? Like,
yeah,
if we were to take the same populations that, and again, we'll come back to real estate, but it's important that, and this is something that we've all been living on, and we haven't really talked too much about the pandemic, but we need to have more generalized testings. I think that America's way ahead of us in terms of the vaccination. I think we're slowly catching up, but there's certain things like we don't know if that vaccine is going to be like, hey, we're A-okay with this, like what you said, all these different variants coming in. So we still need to be cautious in the months and years ahead. Right.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, I'm going to bring it back to real estate here. So I found some those stats that I was looking for a couple minutes ago. And so what I was going to say is I was surprised that the number of sales and the number of listings were so high, right? In my mind, it was certainly a supply demand imbalance, which I think everybody agreed when we started 2021, like our supply, the numbers of listings was at almost at a record low. It was just really, really, really low. So that caused prices to skyrocket immensely. And it hasn't really slowed from there. Yeah, we've seen the markets, what I call taking a breath, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like go, 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 go. And it's like, okay, let's just take a breath for a second. And you take your foot off the gas for what seems to be maybe a week or two. And then there's this another resurgence, right? Yeah. And we're certainly seeing that, like we're going through that right now. Again, this another resurgence. But I was surprised to see that the number of sales, and this is on a quarterly basis, right? So from 2020 Q1 to 2021 Q1, the number of sales, and I'm going to talk your market right now because I have it up on my screen, 66% was up, not number of sales. Number of sales was up 66% year over year. And number of new listings was up 22%. Year over year, right? Quarter to quarter. Mm-hmm. So I was almost surprised to see that how much how much inventory was coming on the market and how many sales was there, because that just is an indication of how much demand there is in the market.
Totally. And I think one thing that we all have to take into consideration too is we've all been held back for the last year or two. Like everyone's been kind of waiting to see what's been happening. And it's just been that uncertainty with where the markets are headed. And we're like, oh, wow, now we're in a pandemic. For sure, prices are going to go down.
Right.
And, you know, maybe they did for an inkling, like we maybe for a month or two this time last year, like March, April of 2020. But now it's like business as usual. And I joked on a previous episode that we're the biggest show in town. You know, not the R&B real estate show, but we're up and coming. But the actual real estate, there's like people are bored at home. They got nothing better to do. Hey, honey, you want to buy a house? Or it's circumstantial and they're highly motivated. They're going, they want to be divorced. They've got more babies coming, like what I've referred to as the 3Ds: death, divorce, and delivery, right? So at the end of the day, real estate there will always be real estate people buying and selling, right? But I mean, it's great that you're bringing that up, that there's high supply, high demand.
Yeah. I mean, we knew there was high demand, we saw supply coming on the market, but as we saw, supply come on the market, we've talked about this, that more supply is going to come on the market. We felt that was going to soften the market a bit. And when we first saw that first kind of like pullback, which might've been the first breath, good Lord, it's snowing again. I tell you, I got my pool.
In Burlington, it's not, but it's a little further north, eh? Oh, goody.
I got my pool open right now. It's steaming like crazy because I'm trying to get it warmed up for my son's 9th birthday that's coming up in a few days. So I promised him he could go swimming on his birthday, and it's it's not a blizzard out there, but there's some pretty good flurries. Anyways, let's bring it back.
83 yesterday, and I dropped her down to like 75 because you just see the steam coming off the pool.
My pool heater has been going nonstop for like 3 days. Anyways, I don't even know what I was talking about. The snowflakes
supply and demand
grabbed my attention.
Now, what I'm going to say too right now for consumers is, because we're going to see a lot of homes coming on the market in the next little while, it's not even going to be a balanced market. It's still going to be a seller's market, but it's not going to be as strong a seller's market. So you're going to have an opportunity to go out and see more homes. Andrew and I have to deal with a lot of offer dates. So if we're saying, hey, there's 5 homes with an offer date on Monday, well, the buyer pool just got considerably lower. If you've got 10, 15 people on one home, it's physically impossible to buy 2 homes at the same time, guys. There are tricks that us as realtors can do to position you on more than one home on a day, to position you, but there is nothing you cannot put in. You cannot put on one offer on one home and one on another, right? You can know that you've lost out on one home, and we can be mentally preparing you to put an offer in on another one. That's what we can do, right? If there's conditions and so on and so forth, but you have to focus on the property you like the most, or the one that makes the most sense. There could be a less activity on one home. The turnkey home is always going to have way more attention on it than the home that needs more TLC, more fixer-uppers, right? Unless it's priced really low. And then you're bringing the builders into the equation, then you're bringing anyone into the equation, because then they're looking at this as like, this is a great opportunity for me to work on this for several months, right?
Well, so I mean, you brought up a good point there that, and we talked about this before, right? Is if you're looking for something, if you're looking for a home, when you buy that home, it's going to be vacant when you walk in. And there's going to be some upgrades, et cetera. But if you're a little bit more of an analytical person, it might be a lot easier to do this. If you're less of an analytical person and more of an emotionally driven person, it might be harder to do. But do your best to get a rough estimate of, say, okay, well, this house A has, these 5 upgrades that house B doesn't have. What would it cost to make those upgrades in house B? What would it cost you roughly? And I'm just going to spitball it and say it's going to cost you 20 grand. If you can get house B for 20 grand less than house A, you're well ahead, right? Furthermore, you're not going to have the demand on house B that you will on house A that has all the upgrades, right? So don't be afraid to go after the pig a little bit, right? Like sometimes those nicely upgraded houses or staged houses, It's just lipstick on a pig. Like I've gone into some houses that look like from a trained eye, I'm like, okay, it's staged. And I can see that it's staged. And at first, when you first walk in, you're like, okay, this is nice. But when you start looking around, you're like, blemish, blemish, blemish. The carpet wasn't put in properly there. The flooring is slipping over here. The countertop is chipped or wasn't installed properly. The grout work is terrible, right? That's what you're going to be faced with, right? So don't be afraid to go after the one that nobody else wants to go after. And furthermore, when you are on MLS and you're looking around, et cetera, and you're going to be you're going to come across those ones that they hired the cheapest realtor they could get, right? Like the cheap people, they're not going to see, they're not going to get the showings. They're not going to get the attention, right? So go in there and lowball them, right? Why not?
Lowball the heck out of Purple Brick because they're never creating competition, right? There's my bash on Purple Brick for today.
Yeah,
but,
well, that, and sometimes you get some really stubborn people on that, right? So they're going to be like, the market value for the house when it's beautiful is 900, and they're listed at like 975, and it looks ugly as hell, right? So they can be challenging too. You get a stubborn person that's out there. But anyways, I digress. Go ahead.
No. So like a couple terms. I mean, just want to educate the consumers out there, our clients, in terms of like value proposition, right? Like, so you're comparing, in previous episode, we talked about progression in certain neighborhoods, having that clean canvas. I'd rather you move into a home that has the square footage, the space, and it needs those upgrades. You need the kitchen done or so on and so forth, doing things in phases. The cost approach, right? Like Andrew was just saying, comparing home A to home B, right? A home that needs a lot more work, you can build equity in it over time. So I'd rather you move in to a better neighborhood in a home that has a little bit more square footage, because to blow out those walls, it's going to cost you a lot more money than it is to obviously to put in those upgrades for building the equity and that value proposition. And that way you're going to get the best overall product long term. Short term, yeah, everybody, if you've got a young family and you want to move into something more turnkey, that makes perfect sense. I completely understand that. You don't want to have to hassle with construction or finishing a basement or so on and so forth, right? But what are you laughing about here?
I'm just laughing because wasn't this supposed to be a real estate investment show?
It is. We're still talking about value proposition and build. This is all about
you and I cannot stay on track to save our lives.
No. I think we are.
Yeah. Okay. So we're buying an investment property when you move your family in, and you're in the right neighborhood with the schools. Anyways, I get there's some valid points there.
But okay, the value proposition and building equity. No.
Yeah, we just started getting on a tangent. We always have to comment on each other's points until we're talking about, I don't know, sand or something like that. I didn't mean to take away your thought process there.
Okay.
It just dawned on me.
I am going to turn directions here in the conversation. I've got something exciting that I wanted to share with the audience here.
Okay, but when you're done that, remind us to get back into real estate, talking about a show, etc.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm really excited about in terms of, we talk about time, energy, money, and as we're getting back into the swing of things, when people move back into the cities, if you were to go to Metrolinx, everyone, a good old chap directed me to some amazing information that we talked about GO trains in the second episode of our series, and it's exciting to see that they are going to be increasing the speed, the efficiency. So maybe not bullet trains yet, but along the go line, we are going to be seeing faster. You're going to be able to get from, then this is where I was going last episode, is our time. And if there is if you can get into a train and you can get from A to B considerably quicker than if you're driving and not having that variable of having to worry about traffic, then this is going to be something which is going to be amazing for our economy as we grow faster. So it looks like we're going to be seeing trains coming in a little bit quicker and a little bit faster going on. So I just wanted to briefly touch on that, so as to share with our clients that this is something that's exciting. So for investment properties, we're circling back to what we're talking about here with time, energy, money. The return on your investment of time is a great place to be looking for investors, is going to be targeting near GO stations and maybe looking for those future projects as well too. So go to your Metro links, and that is something that I wanted to share on this final episode of our investor series.
Awesome. I hope you were sharing your screen there, because I didn't see anything.
Oh, totally.
I saw you. I saw me. I didn't see. I didn't see I didn't see what you were trying to share though.
Okay, so it was just the Metrolinx site, and it just showed basically just a little shot here of, if you can see, it's got this cute little graph here of more all-day services. Services in both directions, trains at least every 15 minutes, faster and more efficient fleets, and and expanded to Union stations. So it's exciting to see that we're going to see more GO action. Let's go.
Right.
Let's go.
All right, cool. Okay, so you had touched about a couple of things with while you were talking about, finding an investment property and et cetera, when you're actually looking at the actual property itself, right? So one of the things you said was zoning. Again, so just to clarify what that would mean and what the significance would mean, you might think, well, I'm buying a house as an investment property. Naturally, it's going to be zoned for a house because there's a house there already, right? So we're not talking about like raw land and what you can put there. But we are talking about if you want to change the purpose of it, right? So if you're going to be buying a single family house and turning it into a multifamily, that's where it would be applicable for you to verify zoning, right? Again, each municipality is different. They all have their own rules and et cetera. So you're going to want to double check with them as to what zoning, would be applicable for what intended purpose you want, right? So if you want to do a duplex, well, that might still fall under low density, right? Because depending on the municipality, it might be low density, might be 1 to 2 units. But if you wanted to get into a triplex, then that might fall into your medium density, right? And you might not be able to put that there. I might not be able to put 3 units. Furthermore, you might also get into something that's called legal non-conforming. So if this is pretty common it's very common in Hamilton, but also somewhat common in Kitchener and some other areas, I'm sure. But you might get into look to purchase a property, and Hamilton did a big crackdown a few years ago for shutting down multi-unit properties that weren't zoned properly for that intended use, right? So you might find an investment property that is a triplex, fourplex, maybe even a fiveplex that is legal non-conforming, meaning that the city knew it was there. They did the proper permits or whatever the case may be to have it there at the time. They might have changed zoning since to bring it back down to low density, but the multifamily is still there, and they're not going to take it away. The significance of it being legal non-conforming is obviously it's legal, so the city knows it's there. It can continue to operate as a multifamily, but it's non-conforming, meaning it doesn't fit the current zoning of the area. If you were to, or anybody, you or the previous owner or the current owner, whatever the case may be, were to change the purpose of it, it could not then go back to a multifamily. So let's just say you buy a triplex, and you think, I'm going to buy it as my principal residence, and I'm going to convert it back to a single family. And then somebody else comes along and says, well, I'm going to buy that from you because it used to be a triplex and that would be great. So you say, okay, I'll sell it to them. They wouldn't be able to then turn it back into a triplex because it now doesn't fit the current zoning, right? So that's legal non-conforming. So as far as the zoning goes, like Ross was talking about, you want to find out, what is the zoning of the area? What can you get away with? What could you potentially do? There's a phrase that we use in the real estate market called, highest and best use. you want to be able to say, okay, what is the best and highest use that we can use on this land? If it's if it's got commercial zoning and you got a single family house there, that is certainly not the highest and best use for that land, right? Or that property, right? So what could you potentially do with that? Another thing, Ross, you talked about was parking. Again, check with your municipality that you're looking to purchase in, because some municipalities will require parking, right? Milton requires parking for accessory apartments, right? So if you want to put a basement apartment in, you have to have parking for that tenant. It cannot be street parking, right? The town does not want you to go there. Other areas, like you said, if you're close to university, et cetera, you don't necessarily have to have parking for 5 people. But you might have to have some parking, or, you know, I don't know, maybe you don't have to have any parking, right? There's areas of Hamilton that have no garages and it's all just street parking. Same with downtown Toronto, of course, right? Parking permit, whatever the case may be. So double check with that. That's kind of like something that we're looking at. I can continue going too forever. So
no, that's amazing. I mean, I think it's great what you said too about, like, I think in my head, like R2, R3, residential 2, like how many dwellings are applicable in this building, right? And then obviously highest and best use, you're thinking, okay, well, that you have the rights if you own that whole specific property with that dwelling. If it's a semi-detached or if it's a townhome, then you're losing a lot of your rights right there as to what you can do with the conformity. Where I go with that is more the fire separation, the sound coefficient, like what you said about non-conforming. Like, please, people, have legal basement apartments. Yes, it's going to cost you time and money, but at the end of the day, there's lives at stake here. So do it properly. Let's have respect for our fellow man. But yeah, it's going to change from municipality to municipality, like you just said. So to contact your local realtor and make sure that they're looking, on the fine print to connect and I mean, you guys can do it too. You can just go down to your local city. In this day and age, it's just a phone call, and just make sure that you're looking in and doing your due diligence. Yes, that's a realtor's responsibility, but I think in this day and age, it's nice to hear it from the lion's mouth as well too. And don't just hear it verbally. Get it in an email. Get it in writing. We can't emphasize that enough. If you're getting quotes for a job, don't just do it verbally. Get it in writing. If you're doing anything where it comes to, like, I think in this day and age, you go a business partnership, joint venture, get it in writing, right? It's going to save you in the long run. And then it's also that what I refer to as the speed of trust. You're all on the same page going forward.
Yeah, for sure. Next thing I wanted to chat about was again, kind of like assessing cash flow, right? So we kind of started to talk about the cash flow element of it, finding out what market rents would be, et cetera. Before we kind of got squirreled, and I was like a half an hour ago, probably. But, when you are looking at cash flow, Ross, you did talk about it. You talked about, like, you started to anyways, vacancy rates, right? So, some of the things you can talk about, just straight cash flow, and then you can talk about having, like, what I call precautions built into your cash flow, right? A nice, very quick and dirty way of assessing a property for cash flow would be to take the purchase price, multiply it by 0.8 or 0.7, and that'll dictate kind of like how much precautions you have in there and how much actual true cash flow you have. And then whatever that number is, divide it by 12, and that should be your monthly rent for the property. It's not perfect. It's just a really quick and dirty kind of analyzer. If that number ends up getting down to 0.5%, maybe 5.5 or something like that, then you're really, like, you're breaking even on the property, right? So that means, like, your mortgage and your taxes and potentially your insurance will just be covered by your cash flow, or by your rent rather, right? If you can get into that 6, now you could probably add in some maintenance, because you're going to have ongoing maintenance. So when stuff breaks, like in my properties, what's broken, Sub pumps have gone. I've had to replace appliances. I just had to spend $1,000, well, almost $1,000 on a new dryer. I've had to change the cartridge in the wall of a shower because the faucet just kept dripping, and it actually turned from a drip to a stream. I've had to change other taps, etc., throughout the house. I've had to change outside the hose bib for the outdoor garden hose. Like, I've had to change those things, right? So, stuff like that would come out of pocket if your cash flow isn't high enough, right? Ultimately, you want your rents to cover all of your expenses on the property, and then create a bit of a slush fund to be able to have money left over to be able to do that kind of stuff. If you can get that number higher into like that 0.7, or sorry, take the purchase price, multiply it by 0.7. If you can get, or 0.07, I'm sorry, then you can get that number into, you can start including like property management, right? And vacancy rates, right? Vacancy, you might say, well, I'm not going to have a vacancy. Well, you might have a month, right? Not to say that you're not going to have a lot of demand for your property, and you'll have a lot of demand for your property. But in all honesty, you're going to get a lot of garbage. You're going to have a lot of garbage tenants that are going to be applying. So do you want to just be like, well, I don't want to lose a month's worth of rent, so I'm going to take, the best applicant that comes in the first 5 applications. Okay. Or you could hang out and be like, no, I'm cool with having it vacant for a month or 2 or 3 months until I find the perfect tenant that's going to take care of my property and is maybe going to be there for, a few years, and treat it like their own. Right. Go ahead.
We didn't discuss this before the show, but I'm in the process of renting out my basement apartment. Right. And it was vacant. So I the guy there previous was there for 7 years. I got very lucky. Amazing tenant, and it was a good experience. When he left, I spent $4,000 in upgrades, new washer, dryer. I put in some new walls, made sure that I was just a little bit of improvements before the next people came in. So I had a vacancy loss of about over 3 months, right? And that part and parcel was because of my choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a beautiful couple in yesterday, and they're gonna be renting it out. So it's a process. Right now, I chose for it to take a little bit longer, like Andrew just said, right? But like typically when you're looking at it, it is the plumbing, it's the electrical, there's a lot of things that need to be done, but you have an opportunity if you're a landlord for a long time or a property manager for a long time to make those improvements when you get that opportunity, if you're fortunate enough to have people in there for several years. A lot of the time it could be a couple years, but I love what you're saying about the equations and giving people a rough idea of how they can be successful long term.
Yeah, I think it's certainly important to be able to have somewhere to start. And the idea of these shows was certainly to try to get some information out there. And admittedly, looking back, we probably could have done a better job of being more concise and being less ranty and et cetera. But hey, that's just our personalities. We like to talk. But ultimately, like there was not going to be there's never going to be a show that will teach you everything, right? You have to. It's investment real estate is such a massive topic, and has so many like variables and segments that, you'd really have to dive in. You can niche out on anything, right? You can niche out on, just buy and holds. You can niche out on, going up to like apartment building restoration, right? I'm going to buy a 29 unit building and I'm going to restore it. You could get niche out on a rent to own, right? Where you buy a property and you set up a program where the buyer, and we didn't even talk about that, but that's a small segment of the Canadian real estate market, but you can be very successful at it. Where somebody just got some bruised credit, has income, but can't qualify right now. So you do a deal with them where they give you a lump sum payment up front as whatever, down payment they can come up with. And then you boost the rents above market rent, and those rents become part of your credit, right? I've seen numbers play out to be a 40% return, an annualized return on investment, and you do like a 2 to 3 year program, whatever works, right? I mean, there's lots of things that you can do in the investment space, right? So ultimately, reach out to us and say, okay, I'm looking to purchase an investment property. I'd like to get into the market. I want to educate myself a little bit more. Like I said, we're never going to be able to cover all the topics because there's just so many things that you could get into. But ultimately, like, the biggest thing that stops people, and Ross, you touched on it, like on your first couple of sentences in the show, I think it's the fear of taking action. Everybody loves the idea of investment real estate, just like everybody loves the idea of the stock market. Anybody loves the idea about making money, but then ultimately, no risk, no reward, right? So you got to put something on the table to say, okay, I'm going to take action. And that fear of loss is oftentimes what cripples people, right? The fear of the next step. I don't know.
Or making the wrong decision. The fear of,
wrong decision.
I don't want to make the wrong decision. Well, getting started, it's a process. You learn along the way. Like we're learning along the way as we're doing the show, right? So
yeah, for sure. And whether that's a different market, right? Like we've got a bunch of properties in Milton. I bought a property in Kitchener, and that was just different, right? The profile, the tenant profile was different, so I had to be more patient. That house was vacant, I think, for might have been 4 or 5 months before I found the right person, right? Because I was just being extra picky, because I had my expectations was the type of quality, the type of tenant that I was expecting that I was getting in Milton, that I was getting in Kitchener wasn't the same, right? So it took me a while to find it. And I butted heads with the property management company that I hired to find me something out there, because I didn't want to drive 45 minutes to do a showing, right? So I hired someone out there, and they kept pushing these people on me. I'm like, no. And I butted heads with them. Don't be afraid to be like, hey, this is my property. I'm going to tell you when I have the right property, right? Or the right tenant. Sorry, I apologize. Right. So anyways, reach out, start talking about, what you're looking to do, when you're looking to do it, etc. But ultimately, like, pull the trigger. It's, I was going to say this, I'm battling in my mind right now, because I haven't had so many inquiries for investment properties, as I have in the last, like, probably 2 weeks. And I'm like, where's all this interest coming from? And it dawned on me that, and I think this is it, is not for sure, but the market's up. It's just like the stock market. Everybody wants to buy, I don't know, everybody wants to buy Apple when it's skyrocketing. Everybody wants to buy, or when it skyrocketed, right? Everybody wanted to buy GameStop when it was at the top. Everybody got in when it was like super high. Like, I'm going to get in, look at it now. Like, BlackBerry was at its peak. Well, let's get in now. The stock market's at, or the real estate market's at its peak. Well, let's buy an investment property. I wonder, and I'm not saying either way. I'm not, because this was like a new thought. I wonder if now is the best time to be buying an investment property, right? I had we chatted about the connection that you put me in touch with. Somebody wants to buy 100 properties a year and is looking for crazy cash flow. Mm-hmm. I hazard to say that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the markets that they're looking for. And if it does exist, it's like it's a needle in a haystack. And the amount of work
you got to go, not in our markets, you got to go further out, right? And it's drying up pretty quick. It's drying up in Kingston. It's drying up in London. Like, now we're looking at areas like Thorold, Chatham, Kent, and what's the driving force? And you and I talked about this, like schools. Like, yeah, the best investment properties realistically are finding places which are close to schools, right? And where it's a much lower cost, right? You can get a big, beautiful building at a lower cost. And if you're close to proximity to school, that's always going to be a solid investment, right? And then if you do it properly through the zoning, you do everything properly with the building, it's going to cost you time and money. And that's the whole thing, and everything to do with this, right? It's going to cost you time, money, energy. But then at the end of the day, you're going to have that passive income for the rest of your life. That building's only ever going to appreciate. The rental cost every year is only ever going to appreciate. So these are what we refer to as appreciating assets. Who the heck doesn't want those, right?
Yeah, but it's a long-term game, right?
Oh, definitely.
right?
Yeah,
This,
100%.
again, like I said, I'll kick a dead horse here. Don't expect 30% a year,
No,
right?
no.
Don't expect to say, well, my friend bought an investment property in 2020 and now it's worth 30% more. So I'm going to get into the real estate market and I'm going to expect that too.
Yeah.
That's just not realistic. You're setting
It's
yourself
delayed
up for a disaster.
gratification. I mean, we're all believers in delayed gratification. This is not an instant gratification game.
No.
This is sweat equity. This is earning, but it's something tangible that you're always going to own.
Yeah.
You know,
And in my opinion, I think real estate should be no less than a 5-year game.
I concur.
Right.
I would say more than that, but I concur.
Well, hence no less than.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like I've owned some of our properties I've owned for what, 9 years. Right. I mean, we got some properties that I started with a family, right? That's kind of when we started. I was in my early 20s. I didn't have any money. So I convinced my mother, let's get into real estate, right? Let's start buying investment properties. And so we have some properties in small towns up north because it was near the cottage and it was less expensive than it was down in the city. And that's where we kind of like got our feet wet, right? We've got four multifamily properties up there, right? We've owned them for, I don't know, 20, 25 years, something like that. Right. And they don't appreciate much because they're up in the middle of nowhere, but they cash flow incredibly well.
Mhm.
Right. So,
So our family, my dad did the same thing, and maybe that's another episode, but it's he did incredibly well buying property after property, and commercial property is a great way to go. Converting residential property into commercial property, that's an amazing way to go, and that's a different game.
it is.
We like to think that during this 3-part series, guys, that we've touched on a lot of different topics. I've really enjoyed this. I don't know about you, but we are here to educate and entertain you. This is the 3rd part of our real estate series, and it's also our 10th episode. So please don't be reach out and contact Andrew Roach. He's up in Milton. He covers a huge spectrum up there. So Andrew, just quickly mention where all the areas that you do cover.
Yeah, so our business certainly definitely Milton, Halton Hills, right? We've got a lot of clients moving up to like Erin Way right now. Again, like a lot of people are moving to something where they can get either something bigger for the same price, something rural, a little quieter is a big desire for people moving up to Erin. Something I guess bigger for the same price going out to Kitchener, Cambridge, less than Waterloo just because of the extra distance going up there. Well, for sure. Or people saying, okay, well, I'll keep my house the same size, but I'm going to reduce my mortgage. We have helped 3 families in the last, I'd say, month reduce their mortgage significant to the point where it's either gone because that was their goal to be mortgage free, or has reduced it to almost nothing, in which case they'll be mortgage free within the next within the next couple of years, right? So to answer your question, KWC, Guelph, Halton Hills, Erin, certainly Milton. When our clients ask us, we do go down to your neck of the woods, of course, as well. But yeah, that's kind of our main focus. Generally try, if it's outside of our areas of expertise, generally try to refer it out. We don't generally go into Toronto. I've got great connections in the city. East side as well. Just referred my brother-in-law's mother to a good long-term, fantastic realtor on the west side, or on the east side. I apologize. Shout out to Trudy Johnson out there. So if you're on the east side of Toronto, look her up. But that's our main focus. So for yourself there, Ross, what's your areas?
Yeah, so born and raised Oakville, live in Burlington, so that would be my bread and butter. We do quite a bit of work in the Mississauga area. I've got a couple people on my team that live and do a lot of work in Hamilton, surrounding areas. We like to venture up to Halton Hills as well too. There's some beautiful properties up there. Any rural properties heading a little bit further north, that's kind of where we cover. We both also have, like Andrew was mentioning, an amazing referral network from not only Ontario but across Canada. So we're here to connect you guys with anybody in Canada at any time. All you got to do is reach out to either one of us, and we're here to assist. I hope you've enjoyed this 3-part series. Again, Andrew Roach here with Ross Bridges, helping you find your way home.